It was the last great roar of British industry, a machine so powerful.
It was meant to be Britain's ultimate answer to extreme haulage, a towering, diesel-belching behemoth forged for one job only, pulling absurd amounts of weight across motorways, quarries, and military airfields. Born in an era when British heavy engineering still roared with pride, the Scammell Commander didn't just look like a tank, it shared the bloodline. This was the final great hope of Scammell, the last monster to wear the badge before the lights dimmed and the curtain came down on one of Britain's most iconic truck makers. Now, before the Commander, Scammell had already built a reputation for doing the jobs no one else could. The pioneer, the explorer, the contractor. These weren't lorries, they were legends. You'd see them hauling tanks, pulling oil rigs, or rescuing stuck machinery where roads didn't even exist. When something truly heavy needed to be moved, Scammell was the name whispered on the radio. They were the backbone of Britain's military logistics and the pride of civilian operators dealing with oversized loads. But as the 1970s dragged on and British industry started to buckle under foreign competition and political chaos, Scammell had to evolve or die trying. And that's when the Commander entered the frame. The Scammell Commander wasn't designed for glamour, it wasn't about comfort or fleet appeal, it was made to do one thing better than anything else: haul over 100 tons safely and reliably, day in and day out. Developed primarily for the Ministry of Defense, the Commander was a military-grade tank transporter with the sheer brute force to move Challenger main battle tanks across Europe, whether in training or in wartime. It had a 6x4 layout and a massive Cummins engine slotted in, the kind of motor that sounded like it wanted to chew through concrete for breakfast. The design wasn't flashy, but it was purpose-built. Its massive wheels, tall stance, reinforced chassis, and angular cab all screamed function over form. The cab sat high, giving the driver an unmatched view of the road ahead. Underneath, the Commander carried over Scammell's decades of experience with rugged suspensions, robust axles, and durable drivetrains. This wasn't a truck for motorways and laybys, this was a truck for airfields, tank yards, and war zones. And for those who did climb into the cab, it was an experience they never forgot. Stories still float around from MOD drivers talking about convoys roaring across Europe during exercises, hauling tanks through rain and fog, with the Commander leading the way like a warhorse. Even in civilian hands, a few found their way onto private low-loader duties, moving massive generators, cranes, and bridge sections. Wherever something massive needed moving, the Commander answered the call. But here's the tragedy. As good as the truck was, it arrived too late. By the early 1980s, British lorry manufacturing was on life support. The Thatcher years were brutal on old-school engineering firms, imports were flooding in, Leyland was trying to hold things together, and the market for extreme heavy haulage was shrinking fast. Military spending shifted priorities, and private hauliers didn't have the budgets or demand to keep fleets of commanders running. The truck was brilliant, but it was a sledgehammer in a world that suddenly wanted cordless drills. Scammell, once a crown jewel of British engineering, had already been absorbed into the Leyland Empire by this point, and Leyland itself was fighting for survival. The Scammell works in Watford had been producing fewer and fewer vehicles. The Pioneer had faded, the Contractor had been axed. The Commander was the last soldier standing, but not for long. By 1988, Scammell shut its doors for good. No farewell tour, no golden retirement, just closed gates and silence. The Commander, ironically, lived on a little longer in the hands of the MOD. The Scammell Commander wasn't just the last of its kind, it marked the end of a philosophy. This was a machine built with one simple idea: do one thing and do it better than anyone else. No compromises, no multi-purpose gimmicks, no fancy electronics, just brute strength, mechanical mastery, and a cab built for war. But when Scammell fell, the era of single-minded heavy haul monsters fell with it. You have to remember, the 1980s was a different world. Heavy haulage was still done the hard way. Operators were expected to know their rigs inside and out. Drivers were mechanics, planners, and pilots all at once. And when a load came in weighing upwards of 100 tons, you didn't grab just any truck off the lot, you called for the Commander. A proper job demanded a proper tool, and for a brief, glorious moment, Britain still made one. But once the doors at Watford shut, the whole industry shifted. The Commander had no direct successor. The market moved on to modular tractors, multi-axle configurations, and increasingly imported power units. Volvo came in strong with their FH16. Scania brought in their big V8s. European manufacturers were suddenly everywhere, offering high-torque, computer-managed, more fuel-efficient options that made even the Commander look like a dinosaur. It wasn't about strength alone anymore. It was about cost, flexibility, and systems integration. What makes the Commander so unique, though, is that it never truly died. At least not in spirit. The Ministry of Defense held onto them for years. Some were refurbished, others were cannibalized for parts. Even into the early 2000s, you'd still see one parked at a military depot, a little battered maybe, but still breathing, still ready. Because even in a world moving toward logistics, software, and satellite planning, there's something timeless about raw capability. When all else failed, the Commander still had a role. And for the civilian hauliers who did get their hands on one, it became a badge of honor. There weren't many in private hands. The logistics of owning a Commander were brutal. The real heartbreak, though, came for the engineers and the workers, the folks who built these beasts by hand in Watford. Decades of knowledge of hand-welded frames and custom axles gone in a flash. The shutdown of Scammell wasn't just the loss of a brand, it was the loss of an entire skill base. One day, you were assembling a 40-ton tank transporter. The next, you were told to pack your tools and go. No retraining, no celebration, just silence. And with Scammell gone, so too went Britain's last great claim to heavy haul dominance. Sure, there were still British firms doing incredible work. Outfits like ALE and Wins continued pushing the limits with imported equipment and custom rigs, but that old school pride of using something built entirely on home soil started to fade. The workshops became quieter, the shows became more nostalgic. The thunder of the Commander became a memory. Ask any driver who sat behind the wheel though, the Commander never felt like just another lorry. It had presence, it had attitude. You could hear it before you saw it. You could feel the vibration in your chest as it rolled past. The cab might have been Spartan, the ride might have rattled your feelings, but there was a sense of command, fitting really, that you just didn't get in modern trucks. You weren't just driving, you were steering history. Some say the Commander was overbuilt, too heavy, too expensive, too niche. But in many ways, that was its beauty. It wasn't built for everyone, it was built for the few. The serious operators, the military logisticians, the madmen who looked at a 100-ton reactor vessel and said, yeah, we'll move that. And it's those people, the ones who remember chaining up in snow at 2 a.m. or watching crowds gather as they crawled through town with a load the size of a house, who keep the memory alive. These days, the few Commanders that survive are museum pieces. Some are restored to immaculate condition, others are battered but still start with a cough and a roar. They show up at vintage rallies, parked beside other heavy haulers of the past, drawing crowds of younger drivers who've never seen anything like it. To them, the Commander looks almost alien. No touchscreen, no cruise control, just levers, gauges, and raw muscle. But to the ones who were there, it's like shaking hands with an old mate. A big, loud, diesel-drinking mate who once pulled Britain's heaviest loads without breaking a sweat. The Commander wasn't just Scammell's last truck, it was the last roar of Britain's heavy haul heritage. Built like a tank, driven by legends, and remembered by few, it marked the closing chapter of an age when power came in steel, not software. It may be gone from the roads, but in the hearts of those who drove it, the Commander still rolls on, gear by gear, load by load, into trucking history.